And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball. It's Richie McCormack here with you. This Sunday in Clonus promises to be a pivotal occasion for both Cavan and Armagh, because they are both looking to bridge quite the lengthy gap between Ulster football finals. To look ahead to Sunday's game is an Armagh legend in his own right, one Aaron Kernan. Good evening, Aaron.
Richie, how's things?
Not too bad. Like, if I was to say to you it's 2008 since Armagh reached an Ulster final, would you have believed it?
Unfortunately, yeah, because the tail end of my county career sort of coincided with that unfortunate run where we've slipped down the pecking order. Obviously from 99 onwards, we sort of had unprecedented success ourselves in Tyrones, seemed to own the Ulster Championship every year, but unfortunately that has no longer been the case for quite a considerable length of time. What
do you remember about those pair of matches with Fermanagh in the 2008 decider? Because I know you had a pivotal role yourself.
Yeah, to be fair, they were fairly exciting. Derry would have been favourites that year to come through the other side of the draw. Fermanagh beat them in Armagh, and I can just remember I suppose the first day, there was such a huge build-up and a huge excitement at it, and I have to say it was a really good occasion. The fact that I was horrible in the first game, I definitely remember that there. It was without doubt one of my worst days playing for Armagh. I think I left my hands at home that day. I dropped every ball that come my direction, but thankfully we regrouped, and it was much better the second day. It probably wasn't as good at football and wasn't exciting the second day, but we won, and I suppose ultimately that's all that matters. But it'd be brilliant for, I suppose, a new crop of players to get the experience also the final day again. Yeah,
winning and just getting over the line seemed to be the theme of that victory against Down after extra time a couple of weeks ago. Given the span that had been between victories at all of any kind of hue in the Ulster Championship, that victory against Down would have done that squad, that management, a massive service in terms of confidence.
Yeah, it should do. Like I said, it's even been a while since we were in an Ulster semi-final. There was always that thing hanging over them that they hadn't won a game in Ulster, and where that wouldn't really bother me a huge amount. I suppose if you're younger, it's maybe something that might seep into you a wee bit more. So in terms of that game, whenever I spoke to yourselves the day after, there was very much excitement around the game, and I suppose the style of it and the manner of it and the fact that we even got the win was exciting. But whenever we look back now in a wee bit more detail, I would like to think that there'll be the vast majority of that Armagh team who will feel that they didn't perform at all or nowhere near their potential. Bar really a couple of standouts was Charlotte O'Byrne's midfield, Ryan O'Neill centre half forward, and Ryan Kennedy at wing half back, who was on debut as well also. They played really well. So I think we have a lot of scope for improvement, and I think to couple that with the confidence from just getting over the line against Down, I would like to think that we'll be in good position going into this weekend.
What has been the spur for this championship? Because I know even when that team was named and the likes of Charlotte O'Byrne's name was in there for the win over Down, there seemed to be a sense that there was potential to do something this year with Armagh where there hadn't been before. What's different?
Well, I suppose there was the anticipation that Kieran's been there for a few years, and we felt it was building, and we've got a couple of good runs in the qualifiers with himself, and I think there was just the whole thing that, again, we were expected to get over Down, and particularly I would say Monaghan losing the night before would have been a big thing, because it just really opened up the whole side of Ulster. Everyone would have envisaged definitely Monaghan coming through on that side of the draw, and it was a toss-up between Tyrone and Donegal. So that was a huge incentive to make sure that we got to this weekend's game, because ourselves and Cavan probably are at a similar level. And granted, they've been going up and down to Division 1 where we haven't been. We've been going from 2 to 3. Championship contest, there hasn't been much between us. They always seem to be fairly even. So like I say, just getting the win the last day was huge. I think we have loads of room for improvement that we can make this weekend, and we'll maybe be a bit stronger as well. Andrew Mornan will have a few more weeks under his belt. Niall Grimley should be back from a hand injury, and Austin O'Neill also has a few more weeks training under their belt. So we should have a few more options in terms of midfield, half forward, full forward, which will make us sort of tougher to tie down, and suppose different types of options, different characters to throw on up front, which hopefully will be needed come Sunday.
Yes, having those options, I guess, is a massive boon to Kieran McGeeney and those around. And Mark Shields is another name I suppose you could throw in there as well. I mean, his goal the other day really did turn the tides in Armagh's favour against Down.
Yeah, it was, because it was a sort of game that I felt we were the better team, but we just weren't pulling away. And Mark's goal, and he was well played through by Rory Grugan, but just instinctive sidestep, walked it around the keeper, put it into the back of net, and obviously gave us a lead that we looked like we weren't going to relinquish. But that was a different story. I suppose we're all talking about our attacking players. One of my biggest fears this weekend would probably be Mickey Graham, because I think what he's proved with Mullinock over this past few years is that he's very, very shrewd, and there has been a whole pile said about them this past few weeks, and I have no doubt he will have looked at a few of the goals that we did concede the last day, a particularly long, direct high ball into our square, and I have no doubt that that's something that he will be working on. I'm sure he'll be working on plenty of aspects, but that's definitely one where I think he will test us, and it's one that I would hope as a defence that we'll have learned from mistakes the last day out.
Yeah, the big talking point, I suppose, or the big takeaway from that Cavan Monaghan game, I guess, is the sense that Monaghan aren't there in the Ulster Football Championship anymore this year, and not enough credence has been given to just how well Cavan actually played during the course of that game.
Yeah, that probably is the nationwide perception, but me personally, I have to say I thought they were excellent. I was complimentary to them after the game, and they dealt with a really experienced, really good Monaghan team superbly well. You can say that Monaghan had a Darren Hughes wasn't playing, Niall Cairns, Conor McCarthy only come on for the second half, but for me, I just thought from the off, Cavan dictated. They were of full belief to what their management had set them out, and to me that's just going to make them a wee bit more dangerous this weekend. While I thought they played extremely well as a group without probably having too many good individual performances or like really top class individual performances, I thought across the line they were extremely steady, very composed, and again, I think that's going to have given that group a huge amount of belief, not only in themselves, but in Mickey Graham and what he brings. They would have been looking at him, seeing what he was doing at club level, and then probably excited that he was coming in to do it at county. Got relegated in Division 1, and they were mad to hang on to his coattails or everything that he was saying, but there would have been a slight doubt, as there always is in your mind. But I think definitely after that, how they were set up and how well they played, and how I'd say a lot of what they would worked on came off, I think that's going to make them even tougher to beat this week, because I think they'll have more confidence in themselves, and they'll definitely have more confidence in him and the message he's getting across to them. And that's something we need to be prepared for. That
Division 1 campaign seems to be in a case of Cavan more or less taking their licks and learning as they went along the way, because I don't think many people would have had them as, possibly, top 2 or 3 sides in Division 1, but to have hung in there, to have had the campaign that they did, they do seem to have taken lessons from it. They seem a far more streetwise outfit than potentially they were 12 months ago.
Definitely, and that's the one thing that I felt was really noticed about them, was their composure, and particularly even whenever Monaghan come back at them the second half. Like Monaghan, to be fair to them, they were just coming in droves, and maybe there might have been a small bit that Cavan were dropping back and were probably afraid to go out and win it. But if you're not used to winning all the time, or if you're the underdog, that happens. But that is now gone, as far as I'm concerned. This is a massive opportunity for both Cavan and for Armagh to make it to an Ulster final. That's why, personally, if I was over both teams, I don't think the event to be cagey about in this. Yes, you do your homework, you look at the strengths and the weaknesses of Armagh, and you try to exploit them, you try to keep yourself as composed and head at the back as he can. But I think you have to go after. I think both teams need to go after it this weekend, because it's a brilliant opportunity to take that next step. It's all been about Tyrone, Donegal and Monaghan in Ulster for this past 10 years. They've been the teams who's continuously contesting and winning Ulster finals. Armagh and Cavan are way down the pecking order of that. And, regardless of whether are we good enough to beat them, say your Tyrone or Donegal at this stage, maybe we're not, but that's irrelevant. I just think we need to get back to the big day and go back to the Ulster showpiece, and that's why I think it's really exciting for both counties this weekend.
Listen to you talking about what's at stake for both Armagh and Cavan this weekend, the fact that Monaghan and Tyrone and Donegal have had this kind of dominance over Ulster over the past decade or so. But even going back to the mentions of 2008 and the fact that was the last time you were in an Ulster final, you mentioned the fact that Derry were the favourites that particular year. It kind of shows the cyclical nature of things in Ulster, and I don't know if that works against the notion that's been floating around of a tiered championship, because we've always had this constant outlier of Ulster as being these chummed waters where pretty much anything can happen. So to try and take that uniqueness away from Ulster would seem to be a huge shame.
Yeah, it definitely would. We're parochial to say the least up here.
Yeah.
And going to Ulster finals, granted, was last year wasn't overly competitive, but in general it always seems to be that case, and it is one that I would say they'll definitely be one of the tougher provinces to shift in terms of, is provincial football ever going to be got rid of? I suppose in terms of it being competitive, it probably generally always is. I would have to say, hand on heart, as a province, we definitely this past 10 years have slipped down. We might be competitive within ourselves, but we very much have slipped down the grand scheme of things. I suppose you go back to the 90s and you look at how competitive we were. We had 4 All-Ireland wins in a row. We also had Tyrone, who made it to a 5th final in a row at that stage. I know even Armagh at that stage were in a National League final in 94. Bring it into your 2000s, obviously ourselves and Armagh doing well at All-Ireland level, Tyrone coming after us. Derry at that stage would have been reaching quarterfinals and semi-finals. So we had a lot of teams who were competing at the top, but not only competing, going on to be All-Ireland champions. And I think that's what brought the whole province on, is that they seen, say, Down won it. Derry seen them win it and thought, we're every bit as good as them. We can do this. I think it give the closest rivals that extra incentive, that extra bit of belief, and they bought into it and they grew by. Where as a province this past 10 years, that hasn't been the case. We haven't won an All-Ireland since actually 2008. Sorry, we did. 2012 was Donegal's, but we just haven't been the same. We haven't been as competitive, and I don't think other counties fare the Ulster teams the way they did, and that's why I think it would be great if we could see a breakthrough again, because I think whoever would make the breakthrough would end up taking another county or two with them, in order to make us more competitive in the broader schemes of things, which would be brilliant, because really the All-Ireland's got a bit boring this past 7 or 8 years. Unless you're a Dub.
Well, when you say it's boring, is it boring from the terms of Dublin's dominance, or is it boring just as a general product from your point of view?
Probably just in general. Every year you would have liked where you could have had an argument to say who did you think was going to win the All-Ireland this year, where there hasn't really been an argument for 5 or 6 years. Everyone is more or less unanimously going for Dublin. That has to stop at some stage. Yes, there's probably not the same quality of games, or I suppose today I was reading, about the difference in quality on show between hurling and football. But to be fair, you just look a wee bit more in depth. You give me the best 7 or 8 football teams and just put them on a round robin basis playing each other every weekend, and you'll get good games. There's no doubt about that. Is hurling as healthy and as good a state across the board as Gaelic football is? Absolutely not. That point has been overlooked. But I definitely do think that football is on the way again. I think the really defensive and possession-based football is definitely under pressure, and I would be very, very surprised if we don't see the attacking mark in for a championship next year. And if we do, I think that adds a complete different dimension to our games. I know some people don't like it, some people feel it slows things down, but for me, I think it's a big positive, because it encourages people to, number one, get their head up and kick a ball, and number two, have more people ahead of the ball, which gives you the kicking option. And I think that just makes Gaelic more entertaining, for the simple reason that it creates more contests. You create more contests, that's what the fans are there to see. That's what gets people involved and creates turnovers, creates goals, and definitely it'll help the spectacle of GAA.
Yeah, it's definitely something I know the mark that Dublin really wrestled with during the course of their league campaign, and probably paid the price, not necessarily wholesale because of it, but it definitely played a part in that. You mentioned the evolving in style from a defensive to a slightly more open, expansive type of football. I guess you could say Tyrone are showing signs of that. That win against Antrim last weekend definitely showed that they've evolved somewhat, that trying to find the one pinnacle frontman is not necessarily the way they're going to go anymore. Sean Cavan has having stepped away in the past couple of years. The amount of scores that came from all over the pitch from Tyrone last week, and I'm not saying that Antrim were any great shakes of an opposition, but it would have heartened Mickey Hart to say that they have found another gear, they have found another way to go and play football that could probably stand to them should they go deep into this championship.
I've no doubt, I fully agree with that. I know Mickey's trying to play it down a wee bit and saying they haven't really changed a huge amount, and against Derry it was particularly just Cathal McShane full forward. On Saturday past against Antrim, it was predominantly himself and Maddie Donnelly, but I have to say their foot pass and their direct style of play has been, for me, top class. I seen them in a number of games throughout the National League. I was at them live, and I have to say they were really, really exciting to watch. Very entertaining games, and they're winning convincingly. I know for a time there, even whenever they won Ulster a couple of years ago, they were racking up big scores, but that was still very much through a defensive-based game where getting numbers behind the ball, creating turnovers, and then they were breaking the numbers. If a team was being foolish and leaving themselves exposed, they were racking up big scores that way. But this style of play, I feel, really suits them and suits the players that they have, because they have some very good kick passers of the ball from out around the middle of the field, and they have a couple of really strong direct ball winners inside that they're really hard to mark. And like I say, yes, you can say it's only Antrim or it's only Derry, but I think they're definitely building for been far more competitive for the business end of the championship. And I just felt as the National League went on that they really bought into and trusted the new style that they're playing. Yeah. And for me, just again, for I suppose the competitiveness of the All-Ireland series, I think definitely it'll be a huge plus come the Super 8s, because their games will be far more exciting to watch. Even though they were winning, my own opinion was they were quite boring to watch. I found defensive, possession-based football, I found it hard to watch. I found it hard to sit through a full game. But we're now, they're kicking the leather off a ball, and I suppose the traditionalist in me likes that a bit more.
They've got players that can play in a number of positions as well. I mean, they can interchange things around. We've seen that with Mickey Hart teams throughout the course of the league, and now into the start of the championship as well. He's not afraid to place people in different positions and move the chess pieces around the table.
Yeah, definitely, and they still have a few people that are missing. Like for me, Kieran McGeary was one of their standout players last year in terms of just, I suppose, his ferocity around the field and the tackle, but also driving up the field and getting scores. So he's out injured at the moment, but will create more headaches once he comes back. But I have to say, the style of football has changed with them, which is brilliant. But I felt last year, and just looking at them this year, they are conditioned to be All-Ireland champions at this stage. I think you just look at them and they're hugely impressive. Just the physique of them all across the field, the pace and the power that they can go at. Granted, Dublin mightn't have been 100% in the league. They didn't have a full squad out. But this past 10 years, Dublin have always had Tyrone's number, and at the league game in Croke Park, I kept thinking, right, Dublin are going, because even though it was only the league, Dublin don't like giving up, they don't like losing. You know, they definitely didn't want to lose that game, and they relentlessly, to their credit, as they always do, kept coming back at Tyrone. And I was just waiting for 60th minute, right, Tyrone are going to run out of steam, but they didn't. Every runner was tracked religiously, relentlessly from the first to the last minute of that game. And for me, that was probably one of the most impressive things. While their kick passing and their inside mark winning was very good, the fact that they could stick with Dublin players in Croke Park, where there was wide open spaces, where there's times you could have felt sorry for yourself and thought, you know what, it's only the league. They're just not going to go that last run tonight. They didn't. They went everywhere, and I think that will be a huge confidence boost for them, that they'll now realise that they're just one step closer to getting back to the top of the ladder, which obviously that's what it's all about at county level.
It is indeed. Aaron Kernan, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Not a problem, Richard.
Cheers, Aaron. Donegal fans, we haven't forgotten about you. We will get to next week's semi-final. Plenty of time before that as well, but that's it for now.